Hey, what's going on, guys? Chris Smythe with the Fly Shop at Tampa Fishing Outfitters, bringing you another episode of our Fitted to Fish YouTube channel. Today I want to talk about a couple things to consider, maybe when planning your next trip, or kind of what we look at on every trip, and maybe it helps us make a decision about where to go, what to be mindful of. And that's really two important things: is tides and weather. Both have big factors on your trip. It has factors on the fish. So we're just going to take a few moments, a few minutes, and talk about each of those things. I'll start off with tides. Tides are a big factor in kind of your game plan. Generally, you have two tide cycles in a day, a high and a low, two highs, two lows, and that can kind of help you plan and coordinate maybe where you want to target. At the top and the bottom of the tide, it is considered what's called a slack tide. The water reaches a certain level, it kind of slacks off. There's not a lot of movement until it's time for that tide to either come back in or push back out. Generally, these rising and falling tides usually have the fish more active. They tend to feed a little bit better, and you can kind of plan where you want to set up depending on the tide. So if say it's a dead low and I'm fishing and incoming, I like to push as shallow as I can and kind of wait for that water to come in and bring those fish in. The fish, they can feel and they understand and they know what the tides are doing. When a tide is going out, I feel like the fish push out, say off of a shallow flat, they push out when they feel that water start to move out. And I feel like that they wait on the outskirts of the flats until it's slack and they can be comfortable moving back in. Is that the absolute case every time? No, but I feel like on an outgoing, I try to push further out as I feel that tide. As we see the tide moving out, I feel like we kind of push out and wait for those fish. Now, once it gets back to the bottom of the low, again, I try to push as shallow as I can, and those fish, once they realize that water is stopped, they feel comfortable and they push up and feed on shrimp and crabs and bait fish that are up in the shallows. Yeah, so as that tide comes back in, I try to position myself as close to the shoreline as I can, and wait for those fish to push up into the mangroves and try to trap any bait that gets pushed up in there. And another thing to consider with tides, and kind of when I spoke about it generally having two cycles, is the wind. The wind can have an effect depending on where it's coming from on the severity of the tide, how much water moves in or moves out. If you have winds that correspond with in conjunction with the tide, you could have real high highs and real low lows, or vice versa. It could be not as extreme. So keep that in mind when you're planning your trips. Just talk real quick about the weather. Not only does the wind have a factor into the tides and the water movement, but it has a factor into where you might want to position your boat or your trip. If you have a hard wind out of one direction, say the east, sometimes it's better to be on the east shoreline, and kind of be protected from that wind, and vice versa. Another factor is cloud cover, and in another video we talked a little bit about selecting the right lenses, dependent on the cloud cover. It may help or hinder you when it comes to being able to see fish. So when you're planning a trip, keep all these things in mind. If you take it into consideration and choose your positions in accordance with, you'll probably be more successful. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and be on the lookout for our next video. Thank you.